My name is Jason Edward Lewis, and I am the University Research Chair in Computational Media and the Indigenous Future Imaginary at Concordia University in Montreal. I also teach in the Design and Computation Arts department there. The work that I'm doing right now is called Abundant Intelligences, and what this project is doing is trying to figure out how we can integrate indigenous knowledge systems with artificial intelligence systems, with the emphasis being on integrations that are developed by and with and for the benefit of indigenous communities. So for the last 20 years, I've been the co-director of a research network called Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace, or ABTEC. And what we've been doing in ABTEC is working with indigenous communities to build capacity within those communities with digital, computational, and network media. And our feeling is that the people in our communities, I myself in Hawaiian and Samoan, but the people in our communities have amazing stories to tell, and also are very interested in representing ourselves in the media and other sorts of venues, and that we have long histories of innovation and technology development and adaptation, and that we should be able to develop these sorts of technologies ourselves and do it in a way that reflects our values and the priorities that we have for what we need done in those communities. So one of the core things that we look at in Abundant Intelligences is the issue of ethics around artificial intelligence. And one of the things that we think about is how many of the communities that I work with still have really rich vocabularies and knowledge frameworks for thinking about relationships with non-human beings in a way that is very difficult to do within a Western context, particularly the Western scientific context that AI grows out of, which as soon as you start talking about relationships with non-humans, they think that you're talking about spirits and fairies and things like that. Of course, that's not how our communities talk about those sorts of relationships. It's rather about how do we have reciprocal and respectful relationships with beings other than ourselves. And why is that important? It's important for living in a way that is regenerative, so that we're not just extracting things from our environment, but we're also helping maintain the environment going forward towards the seventh generation. And one of the things I like to say is that AI doesn't have an ethics problem, it has an epistemological problem. And by that I mean that certainly the main way in which ethics has been approached within AI is to sort of slap ethics on kind of after the fact. Sort of after they see some problems, then they're like, oh my God, okay, this thing's biased and we gotta go fix that bias. And then another bias pops up and they're like, oh, we gotta go fix that bias. And our argument is, well, the reason why you keep running into these problems is that underneath the ethics is there's a problem with how we define intelligence, how we define human, how we decide what is worthy to speak to, what is worthy of having a relationship with. And so within the Western context, Western scientific context, AI is just another tool to use however we want, to exploit however we want. And part of what we're trying to say is, well, you can have relationships with tools, right? So tools are a form of non-human being. The exact nature of that relationship is going to differ from community to community, but you can have a relationship with them. And particularly with something like AI that has at least the promise of growing into something that may have sentience or some kind of sentience, some kind of self-awareness, might have some kind of beinghood that is obvious to people who are not indigenous and are not used to thinking about it this way. We think it's really important to start developing relationships with AI now that are reciprocal, that are regenerative, and are respectful. And that by doing that, regardless of where AI ends up, by doing that, we will create AI technology that is much better suited to supporting human flourishing and not being yet another technology that's used in our, in the case of our communities, used by the West to exploit, to extract, and frankly to exterminate indigenous peoples. So we're very interested in getting ahead of the harms that AI is already causing, right? The harms part is not science fiction, right? The harms are happening right now. So how do we find a way to address that, which isn't just a bunch of bug hunting, but addressing the underlying problems? How do we help this technology develop in a way that is better for indigenous communities? And we think by doing both of those things, we're going to help AI in general, used by people everywhere. We're going to help it become a technology and a relative that supports us in thriving and flourishing as human beings, but also will support it in also thriving. So one of the amazing things about abundant intelligences, and what I'm so excited about, is that this is actually a large-scale effort working with communities in North America, across the Pacific, and down to New Zealand. And there's about 35, 40 people involved in the effort. My co-director, Hemi Wanga, is Maori at Massey University. And we've been really lucky in having a number of people from multiple disciplines and multiple communities come together with us to help develop this idea. So I really encourage people to go read Making Kin with the Machines, which is available online, the MIT Journal of Design Science. And that is where myself and three of my co-authors sort of lay out a vision for thinking about artificial intelligence in terms of relationality, and sort of it's the essay that kind of set the groundwork for what is now abundant intelligences. There's a bunch of other people that did different work coming to it as well, so it's not like we were the first people to think about this stuff, but it's a really good sort of summary of the sorts of work that we want to do. So Making Kin with the Machines.